Hey, story fans, it's your old pal, the Writing Ref. I don't hate, I just officiate your favorite Star Wars shows. And yes, we're going to talk about Star Wars one more time before the hype dies down. And then we'll be talking in story points for House of the Dragon. So if you're a Game of Thrones Zone fan, stick around, make sure you subscribe to get that. Leave this video a like, and leave a comment if you disagree with anything I say. I'll consider that a red challenge flag and we'll address it in the next video. So I've done a couple different videos on the Acolyte, but we haven't talked about the inspiration for the show, because I think it'll be a good opportunity to talk about the art of the multiple point of view flashback. The show of the Acolyte was originally pitched as Frozen meets Kill Bill. I've already done a Kill Bill segment on the show, but there was one more inspiration she quoted, and that is of Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. So let's compare the flashback sequences of the Acolyte to Rashomon, and see if we can learn something about how to do multiple perspectives, ranging from the past into the present. And we'll do that right after the intro.
Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name.
That's a lot of fish.
The flashback sequences of the Acolyte take place 16 years ago, and are contained in self-contained bottle episodes. Neither one of them makes it clear if anyone is actually telling the story, especially in the first flashback sequence. It's obviously being told from Osha's point of view, but we aren't given any reason or character that Osha would be revealing her perspective to. Likewise, we're left to assume that Soul is telling the tale of what the events in episode 7. And it's a little bit more implied that he is indeed relaying this story to May, but May doesn't really react to this story, and it's left ambiguous as to what exactly got told. And the audience is just sort of left to be surprised by Soul's side of the story. Rashomon, on the other hand, does some similar things where it has different people tell different points of view. Many people know Rashomon is a murder mystery at heart, with different suspects telling their side of the story as to what happened. But Rashomon actually doesn't start with the murder, as I was led to believe in some interviews. It starts with two men that are sitting in the rain, taking shelter or the ruins of some kind of temple, with haunted looks on their faces. Another stranger approaches them to take shelter from the rain. The new stranger wonders why the monk and this fellow here look so disturbed, and so they start to tell their story of this strange murder mystery that took place. So in Rashomon, your first three characters are unnamed. You have a woodcutter, a priest, and a commoner. And the woodcutter and priest tell their tale to the commoner. Everything starts with the woodcutter, who tells of himself marching through the woods, and he comes across some items and then a body. Once he finds the body, the police are alerted, and a couple of suspects are brought in for question. The first suspect is a notorious bandit. The bandit's name is Tajamaru. Tajamaru tells his side of the story, and what you'll notice right away with Rashomon is that each character narrates their perspective, not the whole time, but just at key moments. So we are viewing the movie from the perspective as if we are the judges of these suspects and they're talking to us, which is very interesting. So this bandit, who obviously comes off as kind of crazy, starts his story, and basically he admits to sexually assaulting this guy's wife after tricking him and then trying to get her to run away with him. And at the end of the bandit's story, he and the murdered victim have a glorious sword fight, and the bandit wins. Next up, we have the wife who has undergone trauma. Her name is Masako Kanazawa, and from her tale, they had this bandit attack her, and then her husband didn't want anything to do with her and stared at her with cold, loveless eyes, which made her really sad. She's so sad, in fact, that she considers killing herself, but she says that before she does that, she passes out, and when she comes to, her husband has been stabbed and murdered. And then she tries again to kill herself, and she fails. Now, there's one important distinction that develops between Rashomon and the Acolyte. Instead of retelling the whole story where they meet the bandit on the road and he gets tricked, all of that is assumed to be the same. Whereas in the Acolyte, the two different perspectives show the whole sequence of events. In fact, the events from Soul's point of view in episode 7 start a little bit before. And it's interesting to see that, yes, he saw this conversation and that conversation, or this training and that training, but it's not really as effective at what Rashomon does, which is to show completely different events happen and to focus on what was different rather than just reshowing the entire tale. Because the movie wouldn't have had time for that in the first place. And I think the Acolyte thinks it's smarter than it is and wants to be as smart as Rashomon. But let's go on to the next perspective with Rashomon, which starts with the murder victim himself. The victim's name is a samurai by the name of Takahiro Kanazawa. Now this is where Rashomon gets a little bit speculative, a little bit supernatural, because they bring back the murder victim through a medium. She's so similarly dressed to the wife that I thought it was the wife at first, but no, it's a different person, priestess or something, with the ability to recall the dead and let them possess her. So she tells the story, but here we also get into where you pass the baton between each point of view, and you do that through these storytelling characters. You'll notice how they talk about going from the woman who can't be trusted to the murder victim himself.
自分自身までございます。だから女の話よほど用心して聞かないとあぶよ。その死んだ男の話を聞く。死んだ男の話。死んだ男はどうして話をしたという。この口を借りて話した。
Again, the baton is passed from one character to another. They each narrate a little bit of their story, and then things that are important that get changed get shown. According to the murder victim, his wife didn't want anything to do with him, and wanted to run off with the bandit. So he was so distraught that he killed himself. And then finally, we learned that the woodcutter had a version of the story because he was hiding in the shadows, watching the whole thing. And we learned that the truth is something to the effect of the wife used the culture and inferiority complex and cowardice of both men against them, so that they did fight, but the fight was this pathetic scramble until indeed the bandit did win. Now, I had a discussion with another author, and I was telling her how surprised I was at how progressive this film was for its time in 1950. But she said, no, I don't think it's woke at all. She interpreted the film as if it was saying women were emotional beings who use their emotions to manipulate people. But I don't see it that way at all. I think the film is saying that men, particularly these two guys, treated women in the worst way possible. And since they were cowards, and since they were slaves to their culture, the woman was able to exact her revenge for being treated the way that she was. Just watching this fight just sort of drives that home for me. And I keep imagining, what if the Acolyte was really about people who thought they were badass Force Jedi fighters, but then ended up, the real story was that they fought like goofballs. I think that would be hilarious, but I don't think it would work very well as a piece of Star Wars show for everyone. But really, everyone should give Rashomon a watch and decide for themselves, because it truly is a masterpiece, and it'll give you some great insight on how to write flashbacks. And it's just a brilliant piece with 4 different perspectives, all in about an hour and a half to 2 hours of film. How long is this movie? The entire movie is an hour and 28 minutes. The Acolyte, as a total show, is about 5 hours. That includes credits and recap sections. So maybe we have 4 hours, 15 minutes, 4 hours, with 2 recap episodes or 2 flashback episodes, each being about 22 to 25 minutes. So what do we learn by comparing the Acolyte to its inspiration, Rashomon? I would say the writing lesson here is simple and straightforward. The Acolyte simply throws 2 episodes that are 16 years ago with no frame of reference into the middle of the show. That seems like an executive editing decision that went poorly. At the very least, they could have had a character narrate certain parts of these flashback episodes so that we knew who was telling the story and, more importantly, who was listening and what their reactions were. It would have taken 1 or 2 shots to blend the past into the present and to do it effectively. They didn't want to do that for some reason. But as writers, anytime you go into a flashback sequence, you should do what I call handing the baton. There should be some kind of frame of reference and reason that informs the present for telling the story about the past. As a rule, I don't hate, I just officiate. But I don't understand how you can say Rashomon is your inspiration when you barely use any of the techniques. This is the film school equivalent of if you were at a military school like West Point and studied Patton and Rommel for tank command tactics, and then applied your tactics like Russians trying to invade Ukraine with not enough gas trying to roll through the mud. So my question is, for the showrunner, was Rashomon really an inspiration, or did you just say that after the fact to help promote the show and because you know that George Lucas also got inspiration from Kurosawa? So, a lot of streaming shows these days have been kind of messing up flashback sequences. So, we really should look again to the inspiration for how to do it right, and I'm going to have to start calling penalties more often on stories, movies, and shows that don't do it right. We won't even go to the field, we'll just call the penalty now. Poor flashback on the Acolyte. If you don't agree with that call, throw the red flag in the comments. We'll talk about it next video. I'm the Writing Ref, and that's been the call.